Have you ever threatened to leave the country based on who won an election? Well, you're not alone. At least 30% of Americans say they would leave the United States if they could, and many of us already have. There are at least 9 million Americans living in foreign countries, with at least 6 million of us who are eligible to vote. The only problem is, most of us don't. Only 3% of US citizens living abroad vote in presidential elections compared to 66% of Americans who are living stateside. Based on the current number of estimated Americans living abroad, we would make up the 11th largest state in the country. And that's not counting 2 million government employees and military members, plus the potentially millions of more people who are slow traveling or living their lives as digital nomads. But most people don't know that you don't have to live abroad to be able to vote from abroad. You can even vote if you're on vacation in the Greek islands. So why don't more Americans overseas vote? Well, the main reason is because they don't know they can. In one survey of thousands of Americans from the last election, which had one of the highest voter turnouts in over 100 years, more than 30% of them said that they tried to vote but were unsuccessful. Another 40% said they weren't interested or didn't care, and out of everyone who did vote, less than 8% actually voted, which is double the usual rate. But we can do better. Votes from overseas voters actually do matter. Less than 1,000 votes decided the Georgia rates in the last election, and 19,000 former Georgia residents voted from abroad. And we all remember what happened in the 2000 elections with Bush versus Gore, but what most people don't know is that delayed overseas ballots helped George W. win Florida and the election. In fact, it was only a margin of 537 votes. According to research by the London School of Economics, delayed overseas ballots were what gave George W. the edge over Al Gore. Had the election been decided based on ballots that arrived before the deadline, Gore would have won the state of Florida and the presidential election by 202 votes. If you've ever thought about moving abroad, or if you already had, then chances are that one of the main reasons is because you want more freedom over your individual life. But when you move abroad and don't vote, you're actually restricting some of those freedoms, because as a US citizen abroad, you're still affected by policies that happen domestically. Let's take taxes. So as a US citizen, unless you renounce your citizenship, you do have to file a tax return every year, and also a lot of extra paperwork that you didn't have to file when you were living in the US. But that's something that can be changed if we vote. Both Democrats abroad and Republicans overseas have taxation task forces that work towards issues such as the elimination of FATCA reporting for Americans and exemptions for American business owners abroad. Then there's also Social Security, which can be restricted, or your pensions could be restricted if you leave the country, depending on where you're going. Then there's also healthcare. I mean, why don't US citizens abroad qualify to keep their Medicare? These are all questions that we should be asking and trying to change. You probably don't hear a lot about this in the news either, because US citizens living abroad are among the lowest campaign contributors in the country. So we don't have many lobbyists on our side. We don't have many people or politicians on our side. The only way that we can get things done is to start with voting. So how do you vote if you're outside of the United States? Well, voting from abroad is easier than ever. You can go to vote.gov to register in your state and find out about the different options that your state offers. In most cases, you can receive an absentee ballot by mail or by fax. You can even download a PDF, and you can also go to your local embassy or consulate to get additional support. If you go to the website travel.state.gov, you can look up the embassy or consulate that is closest to you in whichever country that you're in. And there's also a great website through the Federal Voting Assistance Program, or FVAP, where they give you a step-by-step instructions for how to vote from your state. It's super important to know that you are still eligible to vote even if you no longer have a US address. If you'd like to lean into help from your party, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, there are also organizations here to support you. You can go to Democrats Abroad, which is actually recognized by the Democratic Committee, and they even go to the Democratic National Convention. Or if you're a Republican, there's an organization called Republicans Overseas, which isn't as official, doesn't have delegates, but they're still there to fight for your rights as a US citizen living abroad, and also to fundraise on behalf of the Republican Party. Regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, I recommend checking out these organizations as they are some of the few people who are working towards issues that affect you directly. Things like tax reform, healthcare, and equal rights for US citizens living abroad. Will you be voting in this year's elections, or will you be leaving the country based on the outcome? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you're new, and make sure to watch this video next so you can learn all about a brand new digital country and passport that are coming soon.